Welcome to CertiKit's webinar on integrated management systems, and this is for 9001 and 27000, quality and information security. So a bit about who CertiKit are. We're a company based in Derbyshire in the UK, been around since about 2010 and have helped more than 4,000 customers globally to achieve compliance to international standards and data standards. We specialize in ISO standards, predominantly 9, 14, 45, 22301 and 27001, and also data standards, Cyber Essentials Plus, and GDPR, both Europe and UK. The reason we're here is we try and make compliance easy for organizations so they can achieve the certification to and to benefit from the standard or the data protection that they have gone for. So a little bit about myself before we dive into this. I'm Ted. I'm one of CertiKit's 2 compliance consultants. My other colleague, Jerry, is manning the foyer, so to speak, and the chat box, and he'll also be diving in and out throughout this because his speciality is 27000, so he'll be adding his knowledge to this webinar as we go through. For myself, I'm a consultant for management systems of 9, 14, 45 and 22301, and my job is to assist new clients and also current clients who are going through for certification or having difficulty with implementing certification, and just help and guide them with the toolkits. I'm also one of the technical authors, predominantly on those ISOs 9, 14, 45 and 22301, and it's my job is to continuously monitor those, update them as and when they're required. I'm a certified 9001, 14, 45 and 27001 lead auditor. I'm also an auditor for 22301. And I've got 20 plus experience in management systems. I had 23 years in the Royal Navy prior to doing this. I came out and this sort of just dropped into place, and I've been doing it pretty much since 2000. I did do 13 years in the Middle East. About 3 years ago, I came back to the UK, and I was doing that out there. Different audience, but the same information. And I'm also a black belt Lean Six Sigma practitioner, as is Jerry. And we find this useful when we're looking at mapping processes and lean management. Okay, so let's dive into what we're going to be doing today. So let's look at what we're going to cover. We're going to look at what is an IMS, an integrated management system, why integrate and the benefits of an IMS, the alignment of the standards and identifying common elements within those standards, integration approach and the first steps before you kick off into your implementation. We'll dive into the implementation steps in a bit more depth with a bit more information. And then finally, we'll talk about awareness, auditing and certification, the processes that lead up towards you going in for your certification. So what's an integrated management system? Well, as you can see from the screen, it's a system that integrates all or part of an organization's systems and processes into one manageable and complete framework, which enables that organization to work as a single unit within unified objectives. For us in ISO, it means the integrating management is relevant to the organization regardless of the size, sector, and to integrate 2 or more of the management systems into one cohesive system. And in this case, it would be 9001 quality and 27001 information security, with a holistic set of documentation, policies, procedures, and processes. Normally, organizations most receptive to this product will be those who already have a maturing management system and who wish to introduce other management systems to it, or any organization who wants to implement 2 or more management systems at the same time. So you don't have to have a management system in place. You can actually go and start to implement 2 at a time. This is something we're currently doing with a couple of clients at the moment. So an integrated management system is where two or more management systems are combined. We normally see 2 or 3 is the most. I think I've seen 4 once, but that was about it. It takes into account looking for common ground between the management systems that then mesh together. And I'll show you later on a slide to show you how easy it is with the new ISO standards that are written in the Annex SL to actually integrate them. It's a lot easier than what it was pre-2015. By doing that, you're going to be able to reduce the amount of documentation, the amount of resources, include common audits, common management reviews, common leadership requirements, common documented information, and competency and training. So why do you want to integrate? Integrated management systems help you to get the benefit of multiple management systems, and at the same time reduce the amount of resources and documentation used to maintain that. So in the case of 9,000, 27,000, you're bringing together quality and information security, and you're getting the benefits of ensuring that your business processes are going to provide your clients, your customers, with the highest quality outputs, whether that's a product or a service. And with 27,000, you're ensuring that the customer's data is kept safe and secure. It's a double whammy. It leads to improved efficiency, it leads to cost reduction, and obviously it's a more centralized risk management environment. And you'll see when we look at the common areas, there are risks associated with the quality side that can then go into the risk register that is generated by the 27,000. Areas in both standards can be enhanced, ensuring greater customer satisfaction and information security. That's a given using these two standards. You're looking at the best benefits from both and providing them in a single unified management system. Some of the benefits we see are streamlined processing. That allows the alignment of streamlined processes, reducing duplication. So if you had a standalone 9,000, standalone 27,000, you would have 2 lots of documented information. You would have 2 lots of procedures for documenting processes and records, etc. 2 lots of audits, 2 lots of management meetings. By having one integrated system, you've reduced that by half. Makes a much more efficient use of resources. The enhanced risk management enables a comprehensive approach to risk management. This is by addressing both the quality and information security risks, leading to a better identification and assessment and mitigation of those risks, and a more unified risk treatment process. Improved compliance. This ensures compliance with both quality requirements, that are your contractuals, your SLAs, etc., and information security ones, which are a lot more regulated with statutory and mandatory requirements. Having them all in one place allows you to monitor them a lot easier, rather than have 2 sets of eyes on 2 different compliance requirements. You've got it in one spreadsheet, one database, and only one person has to keep an eye on that. Obviously, cost savings is one of the standard benefits of all management systems. By integrating management systems, you can achieve cost savings through shared resources, reduced documentation, improved efficiency in auditing, and also certification processes. When we talk about certification towards the end of this, I'll give you an idea of the sort of costings for the 3-year certification cycle. If you do 2 individual certifications, you're obviously going to be paying for 2 individual certification cycles. So just think about having that reduced. And then a holistic approach to customer satisfaction. Obviously 9001 is customer centric, so it's already ingrained in there, but also it helps the 27,000 approach their clients, understand their clients better, and be able to develop that relationship and get their complaints and use their complaints in a better way, because it's using the 9001 requirements to help do that. Stronger information security, that's a given for 27,000. it increases security practices within the quality side of it as well. This is specifically around supplier management, and we'll talk about 9001 supplier management as we get to it. But there is a requirement now that you need to understand that data that you give the supplier that may be relevant to your clients is in a safe and secure format, and is only properly handled. Organizational alignment promotes better alignment and coordination across different functions and different departments, and that hopefully will foster a culture of collaboration and shared responsibility. One of the things we see a lot when we go in to help companies implement management systems is siloed departments. And one of the things we try and do is break down the silos so there is transparency across the business routes, so everybody can see what's upstream and downstream and how they can affect or be affected by others around them. It makes it a much more better way that the process works if people know what's coming in and why it's coming in, how it's coming in, and where their data is going to be used and how important that data is. It adds transparency. Simplifies documentation. Obviously, we're combining two sets of documentation, so we're reducing a lot of it by half. It reduces duplication. It's reducing the time of reviewing. It's reducing the time of maintaining and updating documents. So obviously, by having simplified documentation, hugely reduces the amount of effort gone into making it, producing it, monitoring it, updating it, and then destroying it at the end of its life. Improved decision making. It provides a broader perspective, gives you more comprehensive data for decision making. It enables senior management to consider quality information, security information, and associated risks collectively rather than separately. And then finally, competitive advantage. Obviously, when you get certified and you get your ISO certificates, those are badges of competence. That tells your customers, it also tells your competitors that you've taken that extra step to ensure that what you deliver to the customer quality-wise is the best, and that the data is in a secure, safe environment and will be treated as such by you. It is definitely a competitive advancement because you can use this on your marketing, on your website to promote this. So that's all the benefits for it. Let's have a look now at why it's so easy to actually bring these two standards together. Well, both standards, from this graph, you can see both standards are actually written almost exactly the same. And this is what is known as the Annex SL format in the ISO management systems. All the ones now written, which is apart from these two, 14, 45, 22301, 5000, 31000, all fall into this format now. So from clauses 1 to 10 on the left and clauses 1 to 10 on the right, they've got the same titles. The top three, which are in green, you are not audited against those. They're just background information, some terms and abbreviation, and the scope of this document. So we don't tend to look at that as part of the implementation. It's just, it helps you understand what the document's about and any words within the document that you need clarifying. But context, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance evaluation and improvement are all the same clauses. If there's no arrow against them, they've got exactly the same requirements in both standards. So we can see from clause 4, context of organisation, they have the same sort of requirements. Clause 5, same requirements. Clause 6, there are some slight differences. In 9001, this is where we start looking at change management, and in 27001, this is where you start looking at your risk treatments. Clause 7, support, very similar again, apart from 9001, which looks a bit more in depth at resourcing for support reasons. Clause 8 is where the bit, excuse me, clause 8 is where the big difference is. In clause 8 for 9001, this is where you are looking at documenting all of your processes that are part of your design, design requirements, design inputs, design reviews, design outputs, design product or service delivery, post-product and service reviews or activities. And also within 9000 sits the only mandatory procedure that has to be in place when you go for certification. All the other procedures are voluntary. They are sort of nice to have, but you wouldn't get audits. You wouldn't get a non-compliance if you didn't have it, but you would get a non-compliance if you didn't have this procedure, which is effectively the control of your suppliers, supplier management. In operations in 27000, there's only 3 subclauses, whereas in 9001, there's 7 subclauses. So there's a big difference there. 9 and 10 are exactly the same in both standards. 9 is where we look at internal audits and management reviews. There is a slight, measurements and monitoring. Also in 9001, in that is customer satisfaction. In 27001, it's compliance, legal compliance. But apart from those two, which are quite small, the other parts are exactly the same. And in clause 10, they are exactly the same. So there's a lot of common ground here. And as you can see here, this is where you get your common ground. This is an exercise I did when I put together my first integrated management system. This is for 9 and 27000. And what I did is I took both standards, opened them up, and in an Excel spreadsheet, I put on the left-hand side all the clauses in each standard. And then I had 2 other columns, one for 9001 and one for 27000. And then I mapped each clause across to whether it was in 9000, 27000, or in both. And as you can see, if you just look now down here, we have a few. As I said, clause 4 is fairly normal. They're exactly the same there. Clause 5, we have some similarities. There's a few differences, 9000, because it's customer focused, but establishing the policies will be exactly the same. For clause 6, actions address risks and opportunities, the same across both. And then again, we've got some for 9001, some for 27, and then again support, etc. for operations. And I did the same for 9 and 10. When you think about implementing an IMS, this is an exercise I recommend that you do before you set off. Is to look for the common grounds within the standards you're bringing together. It's going to give you an idea of what you have got or what you can reduce together. It's also important having this because one of the first things you'll see before you implement is to do a gap assessment. If you're going to do an integrated management system, you might as well do an integrated gap assessment rather than 2 separate ones. You do the same. Again, it's reducing the amount of time and effort and resources. This mapping will help you define that gap assessment. Finally, just to look at some common ground in a different way. What I've done here is I've looked at each of the main clauses within the standards. So we've looked at clause 4, starting here, context of organisation, up to leadership, planning, operations, performance evaluation, support, performance evaluation and improvement. Where you see the green boxes, these are all combined within an IMS. The yellow boxes are purely QMS requirements, and the blue boxes are purely information security boxes. So again, just looking at that, there's a lot of it that can be just joined together using combined documents, combined records, combined processes. So now let's look at the first things you do before you start your implementation. Clearly define what you want. It's decided to jump in there. So clearly define what you want and why you want it. Get your management buy-in. This is really, really important. If you don't have the support of the MD, the CEO, the management board, and you come up against resistance, the whole implementation is going to fail. If you need resources and requirements and the management board is on board, then they are beholden to help you and budget for those resources or requirements and equipment that you need. So clearly define what you want and why you want it. We want to have this management system and this management system to ensure that our productivity is efficient and we deliver the best service to our clients, and also to ensure the data that we collect from our clients is kept in a safe and secure area, and we don't fall foul of any mandatory and regulatory requirements. Set up a project team. I think myself and I think Jerry will agree with me here. We've seen implementation where the management have turned around and said, okay, Jerry, I want you to implement 9001, 27001. And it's a daunting task by itself. So look at setting up a management team to implement this, a project team to implement this. Don't think about doing it yourself. It's a route to failure. And then lastly, let everybody know what you're doing. It's amazing. People jump onto these, start doing things, and it filters down. And next thing you know, somebody sat beside one of the process owners saying, right, talk me through your process. I want to document it. He said, what are you doing this for? Why are you? I'm in the middle of something. So we're doing ISO9s. What the hell's one of those? Let people know beforehand. Start feeding them the information. Great news, guys. We're implementing 9001 and 27000 as an integrated management system to improve what we're doing, to improve the efficiency, to reduce redundancy within the systems, to help you doing your job, to make it easier, etc., etc. Make them aware it's happening. Reduce that friction right at the start. This will also be enhanced when you look at clause 7, which is awareness, having awareness sessions as you go through implementation to feed more information to them, to let them know where you are, what's going to happen, how they can help you in the future. It's important to have that right at the beginning. I'm quickly going to go through the 15 steps here, then we'll dive into it a bit deeper. I don't want to get caught up on this, otherwise we're going to be here for 2 or 3 days, and I don't want to do that. So 15 steps in a nutshell. Conduct a gap assessment. So if you've mapped your processes, your standards together, using that, produce a gap assessment document. Effectively, what you should do is produce a gap assessment. You have the requirements on the left-hand side, and then you have a column, and then against each requirement, it's either fully compliant, partially compliant, not compliant, or not applicable. Those are the 4 outputs you can have. For 9001 anyway, for 27000 would be fully, partial, or not applicable. And then just go through each one. Don't do this yourself. It has to be done by somebody who is a step away from the requirements or the department you're asking the questions of. It's too easy to say, yeah, I think we do that, and then tick partial, when in fact you've got no evidence. While you're doing this, you need to ask for evidence. It's no good just having somebody say, yeah, we've got that, that's fine. You need to say, okay, well, show me that. It's going to save you a lot of grief in the long run, that if you do it properly, you know what's missing and what's not missing, you can produce your project plan better, rather than get halfway through the project to find out there's a big chunk of stuff that somebody said they hasn't got. So it's important to do the gap assessment. From that, you can define and develop your project plan. You can work out what areas are going to need the most resources in. We recommend that you do your implementation from clause 4 requirements through to clause 10. The reason for that is because the way the standards are written, information from clause 4 feeds clause 5 and clause 6. Information from clause 5 feeds clause 7 and clause 8. Information from clause 6 feeds clause 7 and clause 9. So they each feed into each other. There are things that you can do in parallel, but try and keep to the standards format. That way you're not going to miss something. You'll catch it all up. Define the context of the organization. This is a narrative to say what is the background to the organization, and it has to be documented. An auditor for your certification will expect to see this. A little bit of history, what you do, where you come from, you know, how many sites you've got, what your staff are, what your goals are, what your mission and vision is, and then what you do to your clients. Are you providing services? What services you provide? Do you provide goods or products? What goods and products you supply? Who your sort of customer, who the types of customers you are looking at? That needs to be documented. And also the scope of the IMS. This is important again. If you're a standalone company, you're a single unit, in 9001, your scope could just touch certain departments within that company. You might say, I want 9001 to look at finance, operations, dispatch, logistics, and quality. That's the 5. I don't want sales. I don't want maintenance. All of those not included. So your scope defines what is going to be in your management system, or what your management system will cover within your business. If you're a multi-site company, and we've just started working with a multi-site, they've got 20 factories around the world. Are you going to include all those entities in your first certification? A word of warning, the certification body will probably need to visit all of the entities within your scope. So if this is your first certification, our recommendation, if you're a multi-sited unit, is to do it in the main office and then use your satellite companies or factories as interested parties, rather than have them within scope. Have them in interested parties, and their requirement is to be compliant with your management system. It's a catch-all, and it's going to save you big bucks in the first 3 years of certification. When you go for the recertification, then think about bringing some of them into the fold and have them on the certification document itself. All your other ones that you don't include can actually state that they conform to your IMS on their documentation. You can actually, comply to your IMS. You can say you conform to it because you're certified. It's just a top tip to save some money. This is an important exercise because it has implications later on. Identify interested parties and their needs and requirements and expectations, sorry. You need to think about who can be affected by, who can be perceived to be affected by, and who can affect your management system, both internally and externally. It's an exercise that you can't do it by yourself. You've got to bring in people from around the organization. Obviously, the outside ones are fairly easy to start with. Well, a lot of people think they're fairly easy, but there's some basic ones that people forget. Customers and clients are obviously your top one, followed probably by investors if they're external to the business. Then statutory and mandatory entities, the ones that you need to be compliant to. Facility management, if you're renting your place and rent your factory, etc., you need a facility people. If you don't do it yourself, they're going to be an external thing. IT support, if you're outside IT support, they're external. They're an important one for 27,000. Outside development for software, that's an extremely important one. All of those are external ones, and you have to understand what are their needs and what are their expectations from you. And you need to understand what you're going to do to meet those needs and expectations, and you have to document that. So this is not a simple exercise. It's one that takes some consideration, and it has to be done properly because it feeds into something later on. Then go to establishing your policies and roles and responsibilities. We now leaped into clause 5, leadership. You can either do an integrated management policy, or one that covers both 9,000 and 27,000. You can have individual quality policies, information policies, but also within here, you've now got to consider your InfoSec policies. And Jerry, if you're still awake, mate, do you want to say a few words about InfoSec policies?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing with the InfoSec policies is there is a mix, really. The mandatory policies that the 27001 standard requires. Most of those policies are defined either in the main body of the text or in certainly for the Annex A controls. The main one to obviously establish right up front and centre is the IS policy, and and our view on that is it's a clearly endorsed policy by senior management that basically gets the message across that your leadership is endorsing your management system and the intent to resource it, commit to it, and improve to it. There are lots of other policies. Obviously, I won't name them all here. We'll be here all afternoon. But there's lots of user-oriented policies. From things like acceptable use of assets, clear desk, clear screen, all of those good things. There's a mix of HR-related stuff, legal and compliance, and then the crux of it is really a lot of the IT-related policy policy documents. So they're the main things that some of them you can develop quite early on, should you have a need for them. Others will come out of the when you've done the risk assessment exercise and established which Annex A controls are appropriate to you. You can then work on obviously establishing any necessary policies that support the controls that are in scope of your management system.
Cheers, Jerry. Next step is address risks and opportunities. The input to this is your output from your interested parties that you've just done, where you've sat down and worked out what their needs and expectations are and how you're going to address those. This feeds into this. From those needs and expectations, you're going to look at the risks of not achieving the needs or reaching their expectations. What could it do to your organization? Or look at the opportunities that achieving their needs and achieving their expectations, what opportunities could you use on those? Again, this is a second hit on interested parties, but it's an important one because your risks will then feed into the risk register. That is a requirement from 27,000, especially if it's an InfoSec requirement from an interested party. So again, this is one of the reasons why clause 4, when you look at interested parties, it's important to get it right, because it feeds into this, which is clause 6, addressing risks and opportunities. For 27,000, again, looking at risks and associated A controls. And this is where they're starting to develop their risk register. And again, our risks on the 9001 side that we've identified from our internal, external issues and our interested parties could be added to that risk register rather than having two separate risk registers. Looking for compliance obligations, Jerry mentioned that briefly. You are in 27,000, there are some major regulations, especially if you're processing data, so GDPR regulations. There's also the Data Protection Act in the UK. All of these sort of things are regulatory bodies that you need to keep up to date with. So there's a requirement in 27,000 to document your compliance obligations and to maintain and update them. For 9001, for compliance obligations, we're looking at contracts and SLAs, and also part of supplier management. Again, these can be combined. This is a one that a lot of people get mucky a bit, and let's define and set out objectives. Now, these are management system objectives. They're not business objectives, management system objectives. and they need to be smart, and they need to be documented, and they've got to be thought out properly. We look at, we have a clear distinction between a business objective and a management system objective, sorry. A business objective tends to have pound signs or dollar signs associated to it, whereas a management system objective tends to have improvement in efficiency, in security, that help the business overall. They could be underlying pounds and dollar signs with it, you know, including improving efficiency may make the bottom line, but it's all about enhancing the management systems to provide the best for you and your clients. So your objectives need to have that in thought, and they have to be smart. They've got to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and then more importantly, time bound. If you're going to start this as a new ISO journey, only have 2 or 3 objectives for the quality side and 2 or 3 for the information security side. Don't have too many, because you're going to have to manage these throughout the life cycle of your certification, or however long you've got in your timeline. We recommend that if you're going to do objectives, have them go over the anniversary of your certification, so your auditors can see that you have objectives in place, and you're monitoring and measuring them and tweaking them to make sure that you achieve that objective outcome. It's a good tick in the box. That's why we say the fewer the better when you first start off. Where possible, try and align them to business objectives. Next one then is operation plan and control. This is the biggie for clause 9. This is where you're going to be looking at all of your operational processes and procedures, documenting the ones that are critical to your organization. They're going to be looking at the criticality that if you don't fulfill that process or that procedure properly, it will have effect further on down line, and it could affect the output to your client. So you need to look at all your processes. You need to identify the ones that are critical. You also need, in conjunction with the ISO, with the 27000, look at the information security side aspects within each procedure and process, because you may not say, well, that's not critical to the business per se, but it does have a critical aspect within information security. Combining both together in one document makes a lot of sense. So you're reducing the amount of resources to making 2 documents. Obviously, you're keeping all the relevant information in one document. So when you're looking at your processes and procedures, it's best to have somebody on the quality side and somebody on the InfoSec side, looking at them, mapping them, and document them with the process owner together, so they can look at both the quality side and the InfoSec side at the same time. You're doubling the resource doing it, but you're reducing the amount of pain at the end of it. Supplier management. This is the mandatory requirement in 9001 clause 8. If you don't have that, that's a major non-conformity. It requires you to verify your suppliers before you bring them on board, and then to validate them on a regular basis, normally like once a year, against the criteria that you set. And the same goes for InfoSec. You need to verify maybe your developers or your IT support services against your criteria, and then validate them once a year against that set criteria. And if they fail that criteria, you look for a new one. It's also should be part of your procurement process. Somebody is asking for a new bit of kit, or somebody wants to buy some new furniture for the office. The procurement should have a list of preferred suppliers who have gone through this verification and validation process. If they haven't, then the procurement process should say that they need to go and get normally 3 quotes. You then choose which is the best quote, and then you do your verification and validation process afterwards. You don't bring them straight on because the quote looks good.
Yeah, if I can interject as well, I mean,
yeah,
one of the other separate considerations, I mean, Ted's just covered off sort of the joint areas that particularly the quality standard requires for supply management there. It also is common in 27K that you don't just, you know, accept suppliers with no sort of approval or evaluation of how well they are performing against that service provision. But the other big factor that comes into play here with information security is obviously how do your suppliers actually treat data. You know, are they handling any sensitive data on your behalf? You know, are you engaging, you know, with any say SaaS services and IT services, and if so, what sort of information have they got access to? What are they processing? And are they actually treating your data as you know, seriously as they should? So that is another big focus area, particularly for the IS side of things.
Thanks, Jerry. Document control, resources and competencies. Since 9001 2017 came out, the amount of documentation required to become compliant has been reduced drastically. But there are requirements to document to show that you're actually doing what you're saying you're doing. So there must be evidence, there must be check sheets, there must be minutes of meetings, etc., etc. So you need to be able to generate your process and procedures, associated documents, checklists, reports that come out of those things. And that's what an auditor will be looking for. Do you have a procedure for this? Yes, we do. There's a procedure. Okay. It says here that you produced this report. Can you show me the last report you produced? Yeah, we got that there. And can I see the one before that? And he's doing that just to make sure there's continuity within those reporting things. This is the part in 7.5, documented information. You need to look at the documented information that you need to produce to ensure that an auditor can see that you're actually doing what you're doing, that the mandatory documents are there, like your policies, your supplier procedure, etc., etc. Documented information has got to be done there. Resources and competencies. Resources on 9001 we look at in a bit more depth. We look at the resources required for the working environment, for the people that are working in there, etc. Competencies go across both standards. These are the competencies of the people involved within the management system. So the quality manager and the IS manager or the CISO, whoever you have in there, have they got the right qualifications? Have they got the right education? Have they got the right experiences? Haven't got the qualifications? The quality coordinator, have they got that? Your auditors, have they got certifications to say they're auditors on these systems? That's the sort of competencies. Monitoring and measuring. This is clause 9, then top end of clause 9. For clause 9 in 9001, it's looking at customer complaints predominantly and monitoring and measuring those and how you deal with them. You have to have a process and procedure about how you deal with them, how you evaluate them, and how you use them to continually improve the management system. For 9001, for 27001, there's a number of things that you're looking at monitoring, measuring. Outsourcing development, you're looking at monitoring, measuring their testing procedures, their outputs back to you, etc., etc. Middle of clause 9 now, internal audits and management reviews. These are mandatory. You must have an internal audit schedule and you must conduct internal audits. Now, you can have an internal audit schedule and you can have a second party conduct your internal audit to that schedule, but they have to be documented. Management review. This is a management review chaired by the MD or the CEO. Normally once a year, if you're an established ISO certified company. We recommend twice a year for the first 1 or 2 years. So you're watching it grow and you're tweaking it and getting used to it. It has to be done and it's mandatory. Like I said, it's chaired by the CEO, the quality manager and the ISO or the CISO, their coordinators, the internal auditors there, and then any relevant party who have had part or affected within the company for that management system for the IMS. It has to be done. It has to be documented. And then finally, pre-certification. We recommend that you go through your gap assessment again from top to bottom against what you now have in place, or you employ a second party like ourselves or any other consultants to come in and do a pre-cert as if we were a certification body to check that you would pass a proper audit, certification audit. It's a useful catch-all, so you don't go to certification with a hole that you just glanced over. So I'm just going to have a look at a couple of these quickly in a bit more depth. So integrated gap assessment, like I said, you need to have a way that you can do gap assessment relatively together. So you've got to be independent. You have to have a way of showing whether they're compliant, partially compliant or non-compliant. You have to have evidence to show that they're compliant and it's true. And you must be brutally honest. It's going to save you so much time in the long run and embarrassment later on. This is one I prepared earlier in good Blue Peter fashion. This is actually one that we've used recently for 9,000, 27,000. I've combined the two standards together. All of the requirements for both standards are down here. All the sub requirements for are here for 9,001 and here for 27,001. For 27,001, I can click whether they're compliant, non-compliant, or non-applicable, and the same here for 9,000. And here I can list what evidence I've got to prove that they're actually compliant. And this goes from clause 4 all the way through to clause 10. It's a quick way of doing it, and it's an easy way of doing it. And it's allowing you then to use this document when it's finished. So as you can see here, we've got lots of compliance. We've got a couple of partially compliance, and here we've got 2 non-compliance for leadership. So from this, I know that there's a bit of work to be done in clause 4 because we've got a couple of non-compliance, but there's definitely some work here because this is missing from clause 5. And when you've done the whole of the gap assessment, you'll see this quite easily that actually we've got quite a lot in 9,001 within operations because we've documented a lot of that, but we haven't covered what we need in 27,000 in clause 8. Clause 4 is okay. Clause 5, there's a couple of things. Clause 6, oh my God, we've got some work there to do. And clause 7, we've got work there to do. It gives you an idea what you're going to do, because from that, you're going to produce a project plan. We've taken that information from a gap assessment and dropped it into a project plan, and we've used our knowledge and our experience to come up with our estimated time for, as a consultant, this is our project plan, how much time we need to assist our client to fulfill that requirement and what days it's going to do. So we had the kickoff on the 31st and it finished on the same day. So, and it was only 0.2, so it was only a couple of hours. Agreed how we're going to share information, confirm the contact details and all of that done on the first day. But for the whole of this, we estimate it's 164 days worth of work for the whole of the project. And it's going to start on the 1st of the 8th in 2022, and it finished the 16th of the 3rd, 2023. So this project plan is what you stick under the nose of your CEO or the MD and say, right, for us to implement this, this is how it's going to happen, boss. This is what we need to do. In clause 4, this is how much time we're going to need to spend on this. In here, we've got myself and Jerry because we're the resources. But if you're going to do this yourself, you would identify who in your team or who within the business would be responsible for this. Then on to operations. You need to plan and implement processes needed to meet the IMS requirements. For 9001, it looks at the critical processes required to fulfill your requirement out to the client. So it may not be all of them. So maybe sales isn't a critical process, so we're not interested in sales. However, maybe the output into operations or into legal and compliance might be critical, because if they haven't got the right information, they can't fulfill their job. You've got to think about the interdependencies of processes, not just the whole process itself. These have got to be documented. So my top tip for this one is to draw the full process map of from start, so from customer at sales or a customer request, all the way through to delivery of a product or service. Within IS, it's slightly different because you will have fingers in all of these in different parts. So maybe within compliance, data that you're getting for your contracts and AMLs and your KYCs, etc., may be part of GDPR requirements and regulations. That comes under IS. So again, with an IS person sat beside you while you're mapping this, you should be able to identify, right, there will be an IS interest in there, and we'll need to dig into that later. We outsource IS IT development. There's definitely IS interest there, etc., etc. So you need to be able to plan and implement those processes and identify them. Plan and review frequency of ongoing risks. Okay, so you've done your clause 4, interested parties, you've done your risk and opportunities. IS have looked at their risk and started their risk register. The risk register is not a dead document, it's a live document. It has to be reviewed on a constant basis. Risks change over periods of time. Your mitigation to reduce the impact of a risk might have taken a really good effect that it's reduced it down to like 0. We don't keep risks that aren't risk required anymore. Clear it off. So you need to keep reviewing this, and you have to review this during implementation all the time as well, because your risk register will grow, might shrink a little bit, but it will definitely grow throughout it. So it needs to be controlled and monitored. Also, this is where you need to think about your supplier validation procedure. Again, you could slope this off onto procurement if you have a procurement department, but it definitely needs a quality and IS input to that procedure to make sure you fulfill those requirements within the standard. And then finally, on operations, finalize the specific standards, the standard operating procedures that you've done for production service provision, for the InfoSec risk and assessments and treatments, for your supplier development. Make sure they're all they've all been reviewed and they've all been signed off by the CEO, or if he's delegated it down to the relevant C-level person, the CEO, CFO, CIO, whoever it is, has to be signed off, because an auditor will be looking at the authority that says this is in place. Jumping across now to clause 9, internal audits. This is mandatory. There are only 2 requirements within it. It is the main ones is general. That gives you the background to it, why you have to do it. But you must have an internal audit program. You must have a documented schedule. So it's a mandatory requirement. It's a document information. It has to be done. Same as management reviews, same clause 9.3. You have to document what inputs are going into the management review meeting, and what outputs you are expecting from the management review meeting has to be documented, and also the actions taken if those outputs require actions. They've all got to be documented. I've just done an audit of a company that did a management system, MRM, a management review meeting, and I started with the latest one that said, well, no actions taken forward. I looked at the one previous to that, and there were 4 actions that had to be taken forward. And when I asked them, I said, oh, we forgot about those. So again, first things you need to do when you do a management review previous management actions. So make sure actions are done, taken, documented, closed. So an auditor at audit time will be able to see that any actions from an MRM are actually closed off. And then finally, improvement, continuous improvement, non-conformity of corrective action. Continuing improvement, the standards, both standards require you to continually improve your management systems. And you do that through your review, through customer satisfaction, through monitoring your systems, by doing internal audits. Now, internal audits will generate non-conformities or observations themselves. The non-conformities and corrective actions within improvements are those within the management system that are generated within the management system. That is your staff, your managers, or your directors coming up thinking, actually, I think we can do something better here. Or that's not working, we need to change that. That's a non-conformity in this concept. And then from that has to be documented again. And you have to have corrective action, and that has to be documented as well. The same with any non-conformities from audits, they have to be documented. There has to be an action plan agreed with the auditee, the action owner, and then it has to be completed. And then the auditor has to go back to check it's being completed and either sign it off or say it's not fit for purpose and need to be redone. Last but not least, then, is update your gap assessment. Check that all of the actions assigned to staff are being progressed or closed. Any open actions that haven't been caught, address them immediately. Update your implementation plan progress to make sure that's aligned, so your plan and your gap assessment are now aligned. Perform a document review. Do this before. When you go to certification, it's in 2 phases. I'll explain in a minute. Phase 1 is a document review and phase 2 is the actual audit. Do a document review yourselves, or if you have an external audit, a second party auditor to come and do this for you, they will be asking for X amount of documents to review that they are then fit for requirements of the documents, of the standards. So you're looking at all your mandatory procedures, not just the mandatory procedures for the management system, but the mandatory procedures that you as an organisation has deemed mandatory for your organisation. Risks identified and mitigated actions complete and in progress. So this is looking at your risk register and make sure that that's up to date and the actions are still in place and that they're being monitored and reviewed constantly. IMS documents have been signed off at the right level and published and in use, and the people who are using them know where they are. Asset lists for IS are updated. So if you've got any new laptops, new servers, new monitors, new fobs, whatever it is, you use IS assets, they are captured and the asset log is updated. That should be maintained throughout implementation anyway, but you're doing this as a checksum. Once you've done all this, you're ready towards for certification now. So all your certification needs, first thing you need to do is look for a suitable certification body. There are shed loads out there. There are absolutely lots, and they go from very good to very bad. And it's not necessarily cost wise, because I've seen some very bad ones who actually charge a lot to make people think they're very good. So be careful. If you're in the UK, go for a UCAS registered certification body. Do your homework. Contact them. Ask them if they've got specialists in integrated management systems for 9 and 27. Not all RCBs will do an audit for an integrated management system. You need to pick and choose. Otherwise, you'll end up going down the twin route of having an audit for your 9,000 and an audit for your 27,000, which will cost you twice. So phone around, go to Yellow Pages, go on the Google RCBs, wherever you are, and just get their number and contact them and say, look, we've got an integrated management system. Are you capable of doing a single audit against both management system, that management system? If they say no, you're not allowed to do that. They're talking out their backside, I'm afraid. If they turn around and say, no, we've got individuals who say, thank you very much, I may get back to you, then go to the next one. Find somebody who's got that. If you're a unique company, well, not unique, but you work in a specialized sector, ask them if they've got auditors that specialize within that business sector, who can then do an IMS. It's going to save you money in the long run. You'll ask them for quotes and they will vary. I promise you, they go from, I've seen top end of 15, 16,000 for a 3-year cycle, so 4,000 a year, to probably 6,500 for a 3-year cycle, so it's about 2,000 a year, and some even cheaper, especially the ones we can certify you in 4 weeks, and it's only going to cost you £2,000. I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. Do your homework again and sit down. You've got your information about your RCBs, who can do IMSs, who work within your specialized sectors, and then look at the costings for each one and marry them up. At the end of the day, as an implementation team, it's not going to be your choice. It will go up to the top team, up to the management board, but you have got to give your best shot and say, look, we think that these 2 or 3 are the best for us, and leave that down then for them, the C team, to decide what they want to do. You've done your job of getting it implemented, and a big pat on the back for that. They perform a baseline audit and assessment to establish readiness. Well, that's part of the thing we just talked about, your internal audit, your pre-certification audit. This is just your catch-all before they come in. I always recommend do that before you go looking for certification bodies. A quick one on certification bodies. Ask them when they're available, because if they specialize in IMSs, they're going to be fairly busy. So you may need to sort of think, can we wait that extra 2 months to go for certification, or we can look for somebody who can do it within 2 months? Sorry, that's something I should have mentioned. But yeah, we recommend do this before that you actually go and look for your certification bodies. Otherwise, you may find that actually we've still got a couple of weeks work here that we need to catch off. And then prepare for the audit. If you've got a second party auditor come in, like ourselves or other certification auditors, pre-auditors, they'll come in and they tend to pretend to be auditors and treat you as auditees per se. So they will look at the 2-phase approach, which is they'll ask for documented information and we'll look at your documented information, and it will be guaranteed. The first one will be your context of organization and scope. The next one will be your policies, and there'll definitely be the clause 8 mandatory policy with 9001, and then they may pick and choose other policies and procedures, especially where they're looking at IS. They'll be looking at certain policies within that. They'll go away and then they'll look and they'll just see what it's like. And if it's good, they'll come back to you and say, this is fine. We're happy to book you in for your phase 2, your stage 2. And the stage 2 consists of a 2 or 3 day audit, depending on the size of the organization and the scope of the management system. They will send you an email beforehand, giving you an itinerary of the 2 days or the 3 days. Always opens with an opening meeting where they introduce themselves. There's normally 1 or 2. Explain what they are, who they are, why they've been invited, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. Then they will ask the audience, which will be the CEO and any of the C managers that need to be there, C directors, quality manager, ISO or CISO, any manager that has a part of the management system, and the auditors will also be there. And they will be asked to introduce themselves and their roles within the management system. Then he'll say, thank you very much. And what he then do is say, right, we'll start with this. And what we normally do, and what I've seen done in the past, is I normally start with the C-level directors, because they're normally busy people during the day. Not the fact that everybody else is busy during the day, but auditors acknowledge the fact that they're senior, they've probably got golf to play and things like that. And then they'll sit down and interview them, and then they'll go through their agenda, and they'll call people in as and when they need them according to the agenda. So you need to be prepared for that. You need to understand that the stage 2, who are going to be the auditees? Are they ready for the audit? Have they got their information and their evidence ready? I always recommend that you have the latest report, the latest minutes of meetings, the latest checklist, and then you go back 3 or 4 to check that they're all signed off, dated, etc., and everything's filled in. Because what I used to do as an auditor, if I got a checklist, I say, fantastic, that's great, you've got the name of the guy there, you've got it dated, you've got the time. Can I see the one before this? Look at it. Yep, that's great. Time, name, signature. The one before that. Yep. No signature or date on this one. Can I have a look at the one before that? No signature or date on that one. So you haven't been doing this uniformly. There's a possibility of a minus non-conformity here, because you've tried to trick me by giving me the first 2, but I've delved a little bit deeper. Take it from me, auditors can do that and will do that if they think that this has been staged. So this is your chance to make sure that your documentation, going back 4 or 5 or 6 issues of that checklist, that minutes of meetings, that also goes for the minutes of the management review meeting, anything to do with your processes and things like that. Make sure they're all done and completed before you go for certification. So I know it's been a long slog. I hope it's been useful, but in conclusion then, have one integrated in management system instead of 2 or 3 or 4 makes the implementation a little bit harder, since the people involved in the project must always consider the requirements of that number of standards instead of 1. But at the end, I promise you the effort is well invested and the project will be completely fruitful, because you will get a unified management system that fits the need to your business, that delivers the promises and the benefits that you've brought into. So again, just to reiterate, the greatest benefits: decreased volume of documentation, better coordination of activities and resources, integrated workflow activities overlapping and doubling the task, and a systemized information for a much more effective management review. And we all know that senior managers, like 1 meeting rather than 2 meetings, and this will help. The key point of successful integration of the project, or any implementation project, is having a good understanding of the requirements. Really know what the ISO is asking you to do. Don't assume, ask, and if you don't know, seek out the information you need. There's a plethora of sites on Google that you can go to. You can reach out to your consultants if you're using a consultant. They are there to guide you and make sure that you understand the requirements. Some of the ISO requirements are written in a language that don't belong on this planet, and you do need to look at them with your head on your shoulder, squinty-eyed, trying to work out what they're doing. So if you don't understand it fully, get it clarified. So finally, a little bit about how we can help you. At the moment, we've got 15% off selected toolkits. So if you haven't got a toolkit, and these are full of documents that comply to the requirements of the 9,000, 27,000 standards, they're not just procedures, they're templates for minutes of meetings. There's gap assessment in there. There's a risk assessment procedure. There's a risk assessment process. There's a risk assessment register. And the documents are in such a way that a lot of the generic information that you'd expect in the document is already there. And then there's guides for the information they're looking for you to put in there. And it's all highlighted in yellow with suggestions for you to put your data in there. It saves a lot of time. We also offer, for a small price on top of that, with that amount of documents, each document has a holder for your own logo, and everywhere within the document, your company name is mentioned. So rather than you go through each of the documents, we can do for a small price the whole lot and brand it for you within your branding, and then send it to you ready for you just to populate. Obviously, we do ISO consultancy. That's one of the reasons we're here. We're both myself and Jerry are compliance consultants and implementation consultants. So we can help you with your implementation. We can do that as ad hoc, by an hour, bleed our ears for an hour, and we'll help and guide you. By a block of hours, we can help you in sections, or bring us in to help with the implementation as running the project for you. So we're there to help you at any time. And also during that period, if you buy the toolkit at any time throughout your implementation, you've got the ability to send us emails to help us clarify how the documents should be used within your implementation. And then finally, we also provide internal audits for companies that are a bit small, haven't got the resources for internal audits. We can provide that. We can also help guide you in producing your auditing schedule, which are requirements of the ISO standard. We can also provide pre-certification audits, as I said before. These are the audits that will check that you're ready for certification and get it done that way. Finally, just to say thank you very much for your attendance. I do hope it's been useful for you. It gives you some ideas of the journey ahead if you're looking at integrating the 9,000, 27,000. We're here to help. So like I said before, if you've got any questions, etc., just drop an email down through marketing. They'll filter through to myself and Jerry, and we'll be able to answer that and hopefully shed some more light on anything you want. So to that end, I'd like to say enjoy your evening, and hopefully see you in a few weeks at our next webinar, which I think is on clause 7 of the standard generic.
Lovely. Look forward to that one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.